Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, February 14th, 2025, and our friend Larry Johnson is back with us. Welcome back, Larry.
I am happy to be here. Doesn't look like we're going to get blown up anytime soon. That's the good news.
Let's get started, Larry, with what J.D. Vance said at the Munich Security Conference. Here is what he said.
With weapons, and the West doesn't make enough weapons. Now, I don't mean to beat up on Germany here because I love Germany, but I wanted to respond to something Ms. Lang said earlier. Look, Germany is the one country, maybe, in NATO that did not follow the stupid Washington consensus and allow their country to be deindustrialized during the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And yet at the very moment that Putin is more and more powerful, where the Russian army is invading European countries en masse, this is the point at which Germany starts to deindustrialize. Look at the number of people working in manufacturing in Germany now versus 10 years ago. Look at the critical raw materials produced in Germany now versus 10 years ago. The energy dependence now versus 10 or 20 years ago. We have got to stop deindustrializing. We want Europe to be successful, but Europe has got to take a bigger role in its own security. You can't do that.
Larry, the first part of what he was talking about is totally, in my opinion, nonsense, that Russia is invading Europe en masse. But the second part, he has a point when he's talking about Germany. Your take?
Well, why is Germany deindustrializing? Would it have anything to do with the fact that the United States blew up the Nord Stream pipeline and cut off Germany from cheap sources of natural gas and was intent on preventing Germany from buying gas and oil from Russia at relatively cheap prices, which would allow its industry to be competitive? You know, the United States needs to take responsibility for helping create this mess. Yeah, he's absolutely right. But you know, it's not just Europe that's deindustrializing. Look in the goddamn mirror. I mean, you know, the United States is not some industrial powerhouse. We are dependent. We've offshored much of our industry. Now, Trump wants to change that. At least he says he wants to bring it back home. But the United States is, you know, long ways from what it was 50 years ago as far as an industrial base. Right now, we can produce 550 Patriot missiles a year. Well, 6 of those, you know, for every incoming missile from Russia that they're fired at, you're going to use at least two Patriot missiles going after it. So, you know, just do the math. You got, you know, 550 will last you a month. But then, in fact, that's the United States can only produce that for a year. So, yeah, you know, it's a legitimate criticism of Europe. You know, I think the one message Europe probably got out of this week's exchange with Secretary of Defense Hegseth and then J.D. Vance and probably Marco Rubio is, we're not best friends anymore, or we're going to start seeing other people. You know, that's like been in this relationship and you show up and you know, this is the girlfriend telling ugly fat Europe, we're going out with some more attractive people than you. So
Here, Larry, when Europe, here is what Ursula von der Leyen said. Then I'm gonna ask my question. Here is what:
peace through strength. Europe wants peace through strength.
What does it mean, Larry, through strength, and what do they have in their mind when it comes to Ukraine? How can they achieve it? How is that possible with the current situation that Ukraine is in right now? And they did it to Ukraine. No one else did it, but Europe together with the United States did it to Ukraine.
Yeah, no, they're indulging a fantasy. You know, they think that they can create. Let's deal with the facts. Europe has very small armies. Combined, they would be still only about the 1/3 the size of Russia's army if you put them all together. They don't have any intact industrial production lines producing tanks, armored vehicles, artillery shells, and combat aircraft. In fact, what the United States wants Europe to do is buy that from the United States, which the United States is making at a pretty slow pace. So, they're talking about a kind of strength that doesn't exist. So they're not in a position to do it. They can't change they can't change the war on the ground. They can't change the trajectory that this thing's going. They're delusional. I mean, Europe right now is in a state of shock based upon what they've heard from both Trump, Pete Hegseth, and now J.D. Vance. They're in absolute shock. Yeah, I mean, again, I'll put it in terms of personal relationships. Imagine that you're dating a girl, and that fiance, you got marriage plan, the marriage is scheduled and everything, and all of a sudden she shows up and says, "Wedding's off. I'm not marrying you. It's been nice knowing you." It's that kind of shock that's going on here with Europe. They've just been blindsided.
The problem is that they're not getting the sign. They're not understanding the signs coming out of their society.
Mm-hmm.
These huge changes that are happening in Europe. Here is what J.D. Vance said in terms of that they are ignoring the far right and left and all of the parties within the European society.
Yeah.
Conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations. Now, again, we don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say. But when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. Now, to many of us on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old entrenched interests.
Yeah. All you can hear is some sort of elites in Europe talking about the policy, what would be the future of Europe, what does it mean for Europe to be powerful. But you don't see people from the left, from the right, those people who are getting power in Europe right now, who are getting more popular in Europe.
Well, the key thing I think for Europe is there's no majority viewpoint. You can't point to one party that represents 51, 52, 60% of the people. They're all at 24%, 30%. They talk about, oh man, AfD, boy, they're coming on strong. They got 27% of the support, and that's considered significant. Maybe it is, but the reality is there is no majority consensus. That's part of the problem. Europe's lost. And what they've come up against is here in the United States, at least, we've had a majority consensus. They're tired of this whole woke mentality. They're tired of being told that white men are bad, that you're evil. And so, there's been that pushback with Trump. Now, the folks on even whatever you want to call that, the left, the woke crowd, the globalists, they don't like it and they're pushing back. And they certainly don't like it in Europe. But, I think Trump and Vance are now basically saying, we don't care. We think you're wrong. And Europe is reeling from that. They're shocked.
In your opinion, how do they want Europe to be? What does it mean for the new administration? And how do they want to manage the relationship between the United States and Europe?
They want Europe to pay its own way. But part of that means the United States needs to start pulling troops out of Europe. We got military bases still scattered throughout Germany. That war ended 80 years ago. And after the war, we justified keeping those bases intact in order to beat the Soviets, who was our ally during World War II and defeating the Nazis. So, I mean, this has been more about a colonial U.S., let's call it neocolonial empire, initiative. And, going forward, Europe needs to pull its own weight. And, if they're going to sanction, then Trump said, if you're going to put tariffs on goods that we send to you, we're going to put tariffs on goods you send us. It's going to be, and if you don't put tariffs on us, we're not going to put tariffs on you. It would be equal. But I really think this week marked the start of the end of NATO. It became very clear when Hegseth said, "Hey, if you send French, German, British troops to Ukraine to help secure the peace, you're not doing it under NATO auspices. You don't get to claim if you get shot and killed and attacked that it's an Article 5. And, hey, we ain't playing that. You're on your own. And, if Ukraine wants some more weapons, you provide it, not us. We've done our bit. We're done." And that was the message. That was, genuinely shocking.
And here is Pete Hegseth, Larry, talking about it.
Presenting inside these negotiations. So my job today and in Brussels was to introduce realism to the conversation. The reality that returning to 2014 as borders as part of a negotiated settlement is unlikely. The reality of U.S. troops in Ukraine is unlikely. The reality of Ukraine membership in NATO as a part of a negotiated settlement, unlikely. And I stand by the comments that I made on that first day in the Ukraine contact group. And that
Larry, there was an article in Bloomberg in which they were describing the most likely scenario, worst scenario, best scenario about the conflict in Ukraine. And one of them, in the most likely scenario, they were talking about that Trump can support Ukraine in a limited manner until Europe is capable of providing whatever Ukraine needs for the conflict to go against Russia.
Yeah, that's crazy. Until Europe is capable, they're never going to be capable. Okay, they're never going to be capable. I mean, it's like looking at a guy with no legs who doesn't have prosthetic limbs and saying, "You know what? You're never going to run a marathon." Okay, it's not going to happen. Now, is there any chance that Europe can get the equivalent of prosthetic legs? No. So it's just not going to happen. I mean, you need. This is really sort of another example of this woke mentality. They're the ones that try to reduce competition in sports so that there were no losers. Everybody's a winner, get a participation trophy. Yeah, Europe's getting a participation trophy. But they're getting beat. And they've let the United States basically humiliate them too. So yeah, this world order governed by the G7, it's increasingly irrelevant. I mean, the signs are that the next decade, the next 20 years, the countries that are going to play the dominant role, China, Russia, India, the United States, they're the big countries or the big economies. Europe is, Europe's fading. They're really a second-rate region.
In your opinion, Larry, the way that Europe is talking about the conflict in Ukraine, what's in it for Europe? What's in it with the concept of the continuation of the conflict? I don't see anything good coming out of the conflict in Ukraine, at least for the European countries.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Europeans bet a lot of money, and particularly the Brits. They were hoping that basically some of this money was like seen as a loan to Ukraine, and that they were going to secure rights to critical minerals, assets in Ukraine. That's not going to happen now. Whatever they hoped to take from Ukraine economically is disappearing. The Russians are going to control the critical resource-rich regions.
Can the United States under Donald Trump force the United Kingdom, the British government, to back down on its radicalism against Russia?
No. All the United States can do is just ignore the UK, and then at that point, what's the UK going to do? They're like a nasty little dog with no teeth. Loud, yap, 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 but they don't have troops. You got a few nukes, but hell, their navy can't even get out of its ports. I mean, the UK is a joke anymore. It's an absolute joke, and they're playing dress up, pretending to be a great military power. They're not, and they really, frankly, haven't been a great military power. That ended with World War I. They burnt themselves out there. Survived World War II because of the United States and the Soviets, but now having to face reality. I think the British Army that inhabited the American colonies in 1776, they had more soldiers here in the colonies at the time than they do in the current army right now. Think about that. So,
in Saudi Arabia, Donald Trump would meet with Vladimir Putin, and they're going to talk to each other about the conflict, most probably about the conflict in Ukraine.
Yeah.
How is that? How do you find it right now, just without European leaders, without any person representing Europeans in these sort of talks, I don't know, negotiations and bargaining, whatever we can call it. But where is Europe in that talk? Why does Donald Trump not considering them?
When you're going to buy a car and you got like a 3-year-old, you take your 3-year-old along and let the 3-year-old help negotiate? No. They have no legal right to sign anything. They have no economic power. They're entirely dependent on you. That's why Europe is an underage child as far as the United States is concerned. They got no, they bring nothing to the table. They don't control vast swaths, vast resources. They don't have, huge sums of money, large numbers of soldiers, and military equipment. They're along for the ride, and they've been freeloading. The other dimension to this that's maybe factoring into Trump's thoughts, particularly with the UK, is it was British intelligence that played a major role in helping perpetrate the Russiagate fraud against Trump. It was a British MI6 officer, former Christopher Steele. So I don't think Trump's got he doesn't have the time of day for the Brits. The special relationship with them, screw them. That's probably Trump's attitude. And frankly, I don't blame him.
The situation that Europe is in right now, who's to blame for that situation? Is the United States? Is European countries themselves did that themselves?
Oh, they did
or
it
a
themselves.
combination of both?
They made their own choices. The part of the problem has been anyone that's ever dealt with the Europeans, and I have over the years, going back to my time at State Department, 36 years ago. There's an era, you got a lot of very pleasant people, a lot of very smart people, cultured, but there's an arrogance there of like, they're better than you. You Americans are crude. We're sophisticated. You catch that vibe out of them. And yet they have indulged this woke agenda. Some people want to call it a leftist agenda. And I'm really puzzled. They call it Marxian. Marx never talked about anything like this. Just read Das Kapital. He was talking about some of the progress of capitalism and what it would produce, which in some aspects what he wrote was somewhat prescient. This is entirely of their own device. Candidly, go into Germany, in Berlin, the sex clubs that have existed there for years. There's a level of moral degeneracy that the Germans have accepted just as normal, that the rest of the world is sort of shocked and appalled at. And so, the Germans have chosen their own path, as have the Brits, as have the French. But I return to emphasize the key point: there's not a majority view. It's broken up. It's balkanized. You got lots of minority views, and that's just whichever minority groups get together to decide to work together on a temporary basis. But there's no consensus about what does it mean to be German. Are we, Germany used to consider itself a Christian nation, no longer. Same for France. You've seen the role of the Catholic Church through much of Europe. It was a very powerful force going into the middle of the 20th century. Now it's become significantly less. And that's sort of the irony, because in Russia, the Eastern Orthodox Church is strong and growing stronger, and plays a central role in the government. You don't see anything like that in any of the rest of Europe, with the exception of the Vatican. Built in.
Larry, in your opinion, with the talks between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, are they gonna talk about the situation in the Middle East?
Oh, yes.
And what would be that sort of talk between the two leaders? And I would say that Donald Trump would definitely repeat what he has said in the media about Gaza. And
not necessarily. I wrote a piece last night before I listened to your interview with Alex Craner. And Alex and I are thinking exactly alike. And he used the exact same reference point I did as far as how Trump treated Kellogg. When you looked at Keith Kellogg, man, he is out saying, boy, we're going to get tough on Russia. There are going to be more sanctions if they don't cave. They're going to, all this threatening language. And then all of a sudden Trump comes out, talk to Putin. I'm going to go visit there. He's going to come visit here. We're going to get together in Saudi Arabia. And then tells Pete Hegseth to tell Ukraine and Europe to go screw themselves. What happened to Keith Kellogg? Gone. So when Trump said talk to his relocation plan for Gazans, it's not a plan, because there's no, Alex and I have both made this point. There's no substance behind it. Because Trump said, well, we're not going to put troops on the ground. Okay, then who's going to supervise moving those people? And we're not going to pay for it. And we're not going to build these brand new cities that they're going to love, according to Trump. So there's no plan. But in putting it out there, it looks like it has forced Egypt and the rest of the Arab world is now sort of come together saying, hell no, you're not going to do that to the Palestinians. And they're putting together a plan to rebuild Gaza and keep the Palestinians safe there. And they're going to pay for it. Maybe that's what Trump wanted. Maybe that was the entire intent of what he said. Who knows? But, when talking to Putin about the Middle East, Putin's going to explain Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. So this, talk about attacking Iran to take out the nuclear facilities, that's a non-starter. And if you do that, then you're going to run the risk of a confrontation with us. Because we're assuring and guaranteeing that they're not going to have nuclear weapons. He's got 1.5 to 2 million citizens of Russia that are also Jews, considered citizens of Israel. So, he's got a concern there to make sure that nothing happens that could jeopardize their lives, but also wanting to see some something positively done for the Palestinians. So it's gonna force Trump to soften. But a lot of what Trump does is this. It's a negotiating trick. It's an act, and it's designed to produce a certain effect. I think Alex described it as to distract attention over here so you can move over there and do the exact opposite. I think that's part of what's going on. Look for Trump. I anticipate that Trump's trip to Moscow will coincide with May 9th, the commemoration of the Great Patriotic War, the defeat of the Nazis. Xi Jinping will be there. So this could be the first big meeting between Trump, Putin, Xi Jinping. So that's I think that's what Trump's looking at down the road. He's not focused on ending this war next week. He's focused on
bigger picture.
Bigger picture, getting back into at least constructive relations with both Russia and China.
Larry, you've mentioned the Israeli wanted to attack Iran, and the Biden administration the intelligence of the Biden administration was reporting that, and Washington Post reported that they wanted to do this, but the Biden administration went against them. Here comes the question right now, with the capabilities that we've seen from Israelis and from Iranians. If Donald Trump decides not to get involved in any sort of conflict between Iran and Israel,
right,
how Israel would think of going and attacking Iran without being massively attacked by Iranians?
Well, the bottom line is that there would be massive retaliation. Israel, despite its false belief, that it is severely weakened Iranian defenses, and that will have virtually unfettered access to Iranian nuclear plants or factories working on nuclear technology. The fact of the matter is that their airplanes, missiles will be shot down, so a large number of them, and then Iran will retaliate. It had vowed retaliation for the attacks on October 27th and never did it. And I think part of that was at the behest of Russia encouraging them to show restraint, to not provide a provocation, if you will, to take the high road. And as a consequence of doing that, they'd get a signed security arrangement with Russia, which happened on January 17th. Now, if Katz, the defense minister in Israel, he just being fat and stupid is not a good look, and he thinks that Israel can go magically destroy Iran's capabilities. Trump is not going to sign off on that. He doesn't want a new war. He wants to be known as the Peacemaker, and that's why I say I bet more on his vanity. He loves the attention he gets when he's the great peacemaker, and so that's where I think his instincts are inclined to go. But he's not gonna. There are those who pundits around that insist that Trump's on the string of Bibi Netanyahu. He's just a puppet of Netanyahu. He's Netanyahu's prison bitch. That Bibi slaps him around. No. Trump is his own force of nature. Now I'm not arguing that he's says the right things, or even sometimes his policies can be completely wrong. But I think too many people have underestimate him. And they claim that this guy is stupid. He's not stupid. Okay, he is not a great speaker.
But by the way, he's the mastermind of rhetoric. He's making rhetorics and just changing the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, just, if you're gonna fight him, recognize what you're fighting. The fact that he defeated the entire weight of the deep state in the United States over really an 8-year period to try to destroy him. It started in 2016, and they failed. They threw everything in the book at him. A stupid, he's not Chauncey Gardner from the movie Being there, who was basically a mentally retarded guy that got to be president of the United States. Donald Trump's not Chauncey Gardner, and he has, he's pretty good at strategic thinking. And so it's just, I look at this, and when I heard what he said about, forcing a new Nakba on the Palestinians and basically blaming the Palestinians for the destruction of the place. Yeah, I was appalled and disgusted by it. But, I also noted he wasn't backing it up with actual actions to make that happen. So that, it was a verbal hand grenade. And like, with any hand grenade, you use it to distract, to create an opening. And, then you have to step back and say what opening it was created. As of 2 days ago, we would have been certain, or as, 4 days ago, that, the war was going to break out in renewed fury on 12 noon to tomorrow, Saturday. That all the hostages aren't released, they're going to be hell to pay. Okay. Well, even Israel has backed off of that. So despite Netanyahu going back and repeating it, they've now backed off of that. Hamas is now going to release 3 more hostages. And still the Israelis are violating the ceasefire. But I think someone is advising, and it may be the Russians. They could be helping advise Hamas behind the scenes to, let the Israelis hang themselves. You don't give them the rope to hang you.
Larry, do you see Donald Trump letting Israel to attack Gaza again?
Out in terms of what he said, yes. In terms of behind the scenes, one thing I think could derail this is if, Egypt reportedly has been putting together a plan, and they've got the approval, or they're going to get the approval of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. There's, 30, 40 nations that are Islamic, ruled by the people who adhere to the Muslim faith. If they show up with that plan to Donald Trump and say, okay, you don't have to move the Palestinians, we'll take care of it. Here's our plan. We got the money. We'll pay for it. I could very easily say, Trump going, oh, well, hey, good. All right, there's a solution now. Hey, the Arabs are stepping up. They're taking taking shoulder of the burden. And then at that point, it just tell Israel, hey, this is going to happen. And there's not a lot Israel can do about it. So I don't see, what are they going to do to Donald Trump? If you don't do what we want, we're not going to vote for you next time. He ain't running next time. Okay? He's not. So the leverage of AIPAC at this point is real limited as far as Trump concerns Donald Trump. And the one thing Trump doesn't like is getting bullied and threatened. So yeah, they may have given him a bunch of money, but he's not going to take their bullying and threatening if they, come after him. He's going to do what Trump wants to do. And what's in the best interest of Donald Trump. Now, whether that serves the national interest of the United States, a whole nother question. But Trump's not going to be sitting there saying, what does Bibi want me to do today? That's nonsense.
Larry, the point is that, as you mentioned, is that there is no next time for Donald Trump. And how is he going to make, as he mentioned, America great again, because in his concept of America being great again, there is no war. He doesn't want war. He doesn't want
Right.
more spending on the part of the government. That's why they went after USAID, all of these organizations. The war in Ukraine is the same sort of mindset, even in the Middle East. He sends more. He agreed. He removed the restrictions on the weapons going to Israel. But after all, we know that he's not going to be interested in sending weapons again and again to Israel. Here is, I think that's why Netanyahu, that would put Netanyahu in a very tricky situation. That's why I'm thinking that Netanyahu would attack Iran, because this would be his final, I don't know, his final move to drag the United States into the conflict.
Well, yeah, he might, if he does that, he will, Iran will suffer a massive defeat. I mean, Israel will suffer a massive defeat. Iran will inflict it on them. And, at that point, Trump may feel some pressure to come to their aid, but at what price, what cost? Particularly if Russia says, if you attack Iran, we're going to be compelled to support them and to oppose you, perhaps militarily. So be aware of that. And so Trump's going to have to weigh that against, I think Trump wants to be at that parade in Red Square on May 9th. It'll be, he'll be one of the star attractions.
That would set the region on fire. I see Iraq getting involved, Yemen getting involved, Hezbollah getting involved, all of these parties around.
There's not a lot Iraq can do. The Houthis definitely would start, they would launch the attacks on Israel, and Hezbollah as well would re-enter the fray. Now, this is, again, the Katz is another religious extremist, and a Zionist that has no regard for the Palestinian people or the rights of the Palestinian people at all. And so he's going to advocate crazy, self-destructive policies. But a lot of that I see right now is noise coming out of Israel, trying to get attention from the United States. I think, you can set out some. I like Brian Berletic a lot, but Brian seems to hold on to this notion that Trump is completely beholden and under the control of the Zionists and Bibi. Well, I disagree. I think, particularly, if it's a different situation, if this was Trump's first term and Trump's looking to get a second term, yeah, then you can make a case that the Zionists are going to have some control. That's not Trump right now it's legacy time, baby. Build the legacy. What are you going to be known for? You're going to be known for blowing the world up, or for creating the biggest Coca-Cola commercial in history. They'll be saying, "I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony." And they'll be swaying back and forth and walking across the grassy fields dotted with flowers. That's what I think Trump's after. To get a Nobel Peace Prize, one that's earned, unlike the thing that was given to Obama. Good God.
Larry, being a good leader in the mind of Donald Trump, with what we've seen so far, do you think that he's considering to be like Reagan, and that would be his sort of goal, objective?
No, he's more engaged with Reagan, and he's actually more, unlike Reagan talked good. The most dangerous phrase in English language is "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Reagan would say that. So he was always attacking the federal government, but he didn't do anything to shut down the federal government. He fired some air traffic controllers. That was the extent of it. What Trump is doing right now and taking on this bureaucracy and money that Congress has appropriated, it's all part of a grift. I really wish people would start we'd get a comprehensive list of the net worth of every member of Congress from when they entered into Congress until now. Elizabeth Warren reportedly has made $10 million during her time as senator. They only get paid $200,000 a year. I don't care how good of an investor you are. You don't make that kind of money. Where's she getting the money? Nancy Pelosi, multi-millionaire. The same for Mitch McConnell. I mean, this is, the United States likes to sit on its white throne of moral judgment and tell other countries about how corrupt they are. Look, Ukraine, most corrupt country in Europe. I would argue that one of the most corrupt countries in the world is the United States. We just disguise it better. We dress it up. We pretend. But look at the Clinton Foundation as an example. You look at the protections that went to hide the identities of Epstein's clients. The people. And we like to pretend that it's only overseas, these other countries.
Larry, the bigger picture for Donald Trump. You mentioned Donald Trump together with Putin and Xi.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the point of Xi being in any sort of negotiations between Donald Trump and Putin about Ukraine?
Well, it won't be about Ukraine. It's going to be broader. That's where she'll come in. Now, you notice that Trump yesterday, so he's been paying a lot more attention to BRICS over the last 2 weeks. BRICS is dead. No, it's not. And he's saying, "Oh yeah, I'd like Russia should come back and join the G7 and we make it the G8 again." And Russia's going, why do I want to go hang out with the Brits and the French and the Germans? That's a waste of time. They don't have anything to offer me. The reason BRICS has become strong and is growing is because of the actions of the United States in trying to use economic sanctions to bully, coerce, and punish other countries. The other countries trying to say, no, you don't get to keep bullying us and threatening us and attacking us. So Trump said, if you don't use the dollar, or else you wouldn't let us use the dollar, you dummy. Prohibited. So that's why we're doing it in gold. That's why we're doing it in our own currencies, and just ignore the dollar. So Trump's announcement of BRICS is dead, I think, is grossly premature. But it's, I think Russia, India, and China, South Africa will come together. I'm not sure what Brazil will do. But at least Russia, India, China, and South Africa will come together and realize, you know what? If any of us caves into the United States on this, the rest are vulnerable. It was like, I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said, as they wrote the Declaration of Independence was declared, we either hang together or we shall surely hang separately.
I don't know, how does it feel to be in the position of Zelensky right now with what Donald Trump and Hegseth are talking about the situation in Ukraine? In your opinion, what's going on with him and his administration?
I come back to you getting dumped by your girlfriend. Okay? If you had a girlfriend. I'm just saying, you're married, so. But, let's say you got this that you thought was this relationship, I'm with you to the end. Well, we're going to endure this till it's all over. Well, the end has come. Zelensky's, he didn't know what to do. So they reportedly launched, claiming that Russia attacked Chernobyl, the shell of the nuclear, now interred, buried nuclear power plant. Now, that's a Ukrainian staged event. He's trying to come up with something that will force the United States to get involved on Ukraine's side. But I know there are investigations underway. I got direct contacts with someone. They've already identified $48 billion that were taken out of Ukraine, and they know where they went, the region of the world, and they know which banks. So they're tracking the money right now. 48 billion these guys stole. So this isn't about defending, fighting Russian aggression or defending so-called Ukrainian freedom. This has been a massive grift, a corruption scandal, a scam, and Zelensky's tried to figure out any way he can keep it going. Party's over. The curtain is coming down. Fat lady is singing.
One of the main reasons to start with the Kursk incursion, if you remember, they were talking about putting Ukraine in a better position. Mm-hmm. Right now, in this article in Bloomberg, they're talking about maybe Zelensky would be able to exchange the Kursk region with some territories under the control of Russian army. How is that realistic, Larry?
No,
with what's going on in the Kursk region?
No, they might as well talk about, hey, I give you 100 acres of land on the moon, okay? you give me your house, and I give you 100 acres land on the moon. Would you take that deal? No, because you're a smart guy. This is ridiculous. Russia is killing at an increased pace those soldiers. Just the other day, they took out 100, and most of them were foreign mercenaries, Americans, Canadians, Brits, French, and Poles. They're just killing them. That's what a lot of these people writing in the West don't understand. Russia's under no pressure to change what it's doing because it's doing fine militarily. It's winning, it's progressing, it's moving forward. Ukraine, on the other hand, is losing badly, losing on any measure you want to come up with. They're not deploying fresh, trained troops to the front. They don't have fresh, trained troops. They got new bodies that are untrained, and they're limited with weapons. They're limited with our ammunition. So, I think the collapse for them is going to come actually pretty quick.
They have lost so far in the Kursk region more than 60,000 soldiers, the best ones in the Kursk region. I think in history, they're going to talk about the Kursk region again after the Second World War, again talking about how, I don't know who was the mastermind of this sort of incursion, which many people are believing that is the British government and the British intelligence were behind this. But that was a totally stupid strategy on their part because they have destroyed these people and they lost on the main line of the conflict.
Yeah. No, it's just that they haven't had. What's funny is the West has been doing the military planning for a lot of these Ukrainian military operations. That's like you select your coach. So you're going to play the World Cup. And the coach you select to coach your team is a guy that's never won any games, that he's lost every football match. Every team he's ever coached has lost a match. That's who's coaching your team? What do you think's going to happen? Exactly what's happened. The Russians have defeated the Ukrainians and defeated NATO in the process. The West just doesn't want to admit it.
Larry, the way that Hexet talked about the situation in Ukraine, he said that we're not going to put the American troops on the ground for the security of Ukraine. He was talking about in the aftermath of any sort of negotiation talks in Ukraine. And he put all the burden on Europeans. And do you think that's a sign from the United States that they're not considering anymore Europe as a priority for them? They're leaving Ukraine together with Europe.
Yeah, the title
and NATO is not interested in getting involved in any sort of conflict. NATO, I mean the United States, not interested in getting involved in any sort of conflict with Russia.
Hey, the title of my piece at sonar21.com 2 nights ago, Trump tells Ukraine and Europe, you're fired. You know, it's like back when he was on The Apprentice. You're fired. So not only is the United States, we're not going to put troops on the ground. We're not going to start funding more weapons and non-military support to Ukraine. Europe, you got to do that. If you, the Europeans, decide you want to rush troops into Ukraine, fine, you can do that, but you're not going to do that under NATO. You don't get to call yourself NATO, and you don't get to invoke Article 5 because we won't recognize it. This is not a NATO-approved operation. This is you guys doing it on your own. So if you want to do it, go ahead and do it, but don't count on us. And, you know, and no way in hell is Ukraine coming into NATO, and it is the situation is such that going forward, you provide all the material support. Have a nice day. The war's over. Now, is there fighting continuing? Yes. Are armies going to continue to maneuver on the ground? Yes. But the war is over. It's just the question of when the final shot is fired, and when Zelensky and crowd recognize they're going to have to surrender, or they're going to be, they'll be conquered militarily. Now, Russia is not. Let me put it this way: I'd be shocked if Russia agrees to a ceasefire. They did that once before with Minsk 1 and Minsk 2. They got screwed. They're not going to do it again. They're going to continue to press the military victory until such time as they get the complete negotiation of the end, not just of U.S. support, but the end of European support for Ukraine, and the new elections. Get rid of this Bandera and neo-Nazi crowd.
Larry, yesterday I was talking with Richard Wolff and Michael Hodson, and I asked them about the security architecture of Europe together with Russia. And the point that Richard was making, that they didn't abide, Europeans together with the United States, they didn't abide with the agreements, treaties with Russia. Why does Russia need a new security architecture with Europe if they don't abide by what they're talking about, what they're making in terms of treaties, agreement with Russia? How is that going to work in the mind of Russians right now when they're talking about the security architecture of Europe? And if they know that they won't abide by their agreements, treaties, and all of these sort of negotiations?
Well, what they're going to agree on is going to require concrete, visible actions on the part of the West and Europe. Shutting down a base, you can't hide that. Shut down a base. Withdraw a weapon system. The weapon system's taken down, and you can no longer see it on satellite photography. No, I mean, the Russians are going to be very, very, very specific about what needs to happen. And to the extent that Europeans or some Americans labor under the false notion that they've got leverage over Russia and Putin, they have no leverage. That's the thing people need to come to grips with. I had I won't call it an argument, but a strong difference. Actually, it wasn't even a difference of opinion. I was presenting this idiot with facts. I wrote that Russia reported its growth of GDP for 2024 is 4.1%. And you could argue, well, that's Russians will they'll lie about anything. Well, the World Bank and the IMF separately, one of them reported 3.8 and the other 3.9% for Russia. Well, that's from 4.1 to 3.8, that's 0.3%. Not a lot. So you have to say that that's, and when I presented that, this guy started attacking me like, oh, why are you buying the Russian propaganda? And I said, hey, dude, not my facts. You may not like the Russian facts, but IMF and World Bank, if you want to argue with them, go argue with them. Don't argue with me. That's the facts. So what are the facts? The Russians have an army now of 1.5 million soldiers under arms that are capable of deploying to the front. Europe does not. England's got a total of 70,000. They'd be hard-pressed to put 35,000 up. I think Germany's numbers are around 80, 90,000, maybe less, but they don't have enough weapons for their soldiers. The French, I guess, got like 120. They don't have the numbers. And apart from not having the numbers, they don't have personnel that's actually trained and prepared to fight in the kind of environment that Ukraine is. So it's just, delusional stuff in the West. They keep lying to themselves, and they stare in the mirror and they ask the mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And one of these days the mirror will finally come back and say, "Oh, ain't you, lady? It's the Russians."
Just before wrapping up this session, Larry, Sikorsky, you know him.
Oh yes, our friend,
Foreign Minister of Poland.
Radoslav Sikorsky,
Sikorsky,
who was part of a social club with Boris Johnson. Who knows if they were buggering each other?
He's talking about making Europeans stronger and making the military power of Europe even better, improving the military power of Europe. Do we know what are the capabilities of Poland in terms of producing arms? Because if you remember, since the conflict in Ukraine started, one of the countries in Europe which was totally, I would say, shoulder to shoulder to what the British government was doing was the government in Poland.
Yeah.
What do we know about their capabilities?
Again, they're limited. They're let's call them second tier. Now they've got the advantage of a NATO troops there, and actually, I was J.D. Vance or Hegseth just in the last day or two talked about pushing more U.S. troops into Poland. So all that means is you're going to get more Polish girls or more prostitutes brought in from outside, some more human trafficking, because the level of prostitution will go up with U.S. troops on the ground, and it's going to create more social tension in Poland. We'll get sick and tired of the Americans being there because they'll get into bars and fight, and won't be very good guests of the country. So Sikorsky he's just grasping at straws. Again, they don't know what to do. They have been stunned by Trump's actions, and now they're trying to figure out how do we salvage this. Well, that's like captain of the Titanic. Let's go down and check out below. Well, you know what, Captain? This boat's sinking, and there's no way to keep it afloat. Let's call this, Donald Trump was the iceberg, European Union and NATO, the ship U.S., the good ship Titanic, and it's going to the bottom.
Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today.
Well, wait a second. You didn't ask me who is the Leonardo DiCaprio of Europe. Sorry. Yeah. Macron. So, all right. We'll see you Monday. Let's see what other events unfold in the next couple of days.
Yeah, exactly. See you
All
on
right,
Monday, Larry.
All right, my friend.
Take
Thanks.
care. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.